The call came in just before dawn, when the East River was still black and the city pretended not to notice what sat in its shadow. An inmate had been found unresponsive inside a housing unit on Rikers Island. No witnesses, no alarms, just a body on a cold floor in a jail that was never supposed to keep secrets this long. By the time investigators arrived, the unit was already quiet, too quiet. Doors locked, inmates lined up, guards standing still, eyes forward, as if everyone had rehearsed the moment. Rikers had always been loud. Shouting, metal doors slamming, voices echoing through concrete corridors. Silence meant something had gone wrong. The victim was Marcus Reed, 23 years old, held on a nonviolent charge. He wasn't supposed to be dead. He wasn't supposed to matter. But his name began to circulate almost immediately, passed in whispers among officers and inmates alike. Because Marcus had talked, not to police, not to lawyers, to other inmates, about who really ran the housing unit, about which guards could be approached, and which ones took orders instead of giving them. Rikers Island was officially a jail complex run by New York City. Unofficially, it was a place known only through rumors, stories told by defense attorneys, former inmates, and burned-out corrections officers who transferred out as fast as they could. A place where control didn't always come from a badge. Detective Elena Morales had seen difficult institutions before, but stepping onto Rikers felt different. The air was heavier, the buildings older, layered with decades of neglect and unspoken rules. This wasn't a facility built to reform or rehabilitate. It was built to hold, to isolate, to silence. Rikers wasn't designed as a long-term solution. It was meant to be temporary, a holding place for people waiting on the system to decide their fate. Over time, that purpose collapsed, said under overcrowding, understaffing, and pressure no city wanted to admit existed. That was the reason for its creation, and ultimately, its failure. Inside Marcus Reed's unit, Morales noticed something immediately. The guards didn't move like they were in control. They watched the inmates closely, carefully, as if measuring reactions. Conversations were brief. Orders were suggestions. One officer pulled Morales aside and spoke low. "You didn't hear this from me," he said. But Marcus crossed a line. "What line?" Morales asked. The officer hesitated. "The wrong people. Severed entry, that's what officers used to call it when someone was transferred into certain housing units. Once you crossed in, you didn't come back out the same. Your paperwork might still exist, but your voice didn't." Marcus had been moved 3 times in 6 weeks. No explanation, no disciplinary write-ups, just quiet transfers deeper into the system. That wasn't normal. Morales requested surveillance footage. Half of it was missing. Cameras down for maintenance, logs incomplete, timestamps off by minutes, sometimes hours. Erased time wasn't an accident at Rikers, it was routine. When Morales interviewed inmates, they spoke in fragments. No full sentences, no direct accusations, just looks, gestures, pauses that said more than words ever could. "They don't need to hit you," one inmate finally said. "They just let it happen." Life in confinement followed a strict rhythm. Count, meals, lockdown, recreation. But beneath that routine was another structure, one that mattered more. Who controlled phones? Who controlled commissary? Who decided whether you were protected or exposed? In Marcus Reed's unit, power didn't belong to the guards. Morales tracked Marcus's final days. He had filed a grievance never processed, requested protective custody denied, spoke with a legal aid volunteer AB, out things being different at night. Then he stopped talking altogether. The official report labeled his death as pending investigation. No cause listed, no urgency implied. Just another line item in a system built to absorb loss without consequence. But Morales wasn't convinced. She pulled older records. Patterns emerged. Inmates who complained were transferred. Inmates who transferred went silent. Guards assigned to those units stayed there unusually long, rarely rotated out. It wasn't corruption in the traditional sense. It was something quieter. Agreements. Understandings. Survival. Rikers didn't collapse into chaos. It adapted. The unspoken truth was simple. Some guards stopped enforcing rules because enforcing them made life harder. Certain inmates maintained order, settled disputes, kept violence contained so long as they were left alone. Authority became negotiable. And Marcus Reed had refused to negotiate. Late that night, Morales received a call from a corrections officer willing to talk off the record. They met in a parking lot far from the island. Engines running, windows cracked. "There are units where we don't decide who moves," the officer said. "We just process it." "Who does?" Morales asked. The officer swallowed. "The inmates. And the people who benefit from pretending they don't." Before Morales could ask another question, the officer's phone buzzed. His face changed. He looked up, panicked. "They know," he said. The next morning, the officer didn't show up for his shift. By afternoon, Morales learned he'd been transferred without notice to another facility. No forwarding information, no explanation. And when Morales returned to Marcus Reed's unit with a warrant to access a locked storage room beneath the housing tier, a room that didn't appear on any official blueprint, the supervising captain hesitated just long enough to raise suspicion. Because whatever was hidden inside that locked room wasn't meant to be seen. And opening it would expose exactly how far power had shifted on Rikers Island. The door opened slowly, metal grinding against metal, the sound echoing down the concrete corridor like a warning. Detective Elena Morales stood just behind the threshold as a flashlight cut through the darkness of the storage room beneath the housing tier. It wasn't storage. Inside were makeshift barriers, confiscated items never logged into evidence, handwritten lists taped to the wall, names, cell numbers, schedules, a system of movement that existed parallel to the official one. This wasn't neglect. It was governance. Morales photographed everything. Before she could finish, a supervisor arrived, breathless, insisting there had been a mistake. The room, he claimed, was inactive. Old materials, nothing relevant. By the end of the day, the room was sealed again, and the photos were gone from the system. That was when the danger escalated. Morales's requests were denied one after another. Access revoked, meetings canceled. Her captain advised her to let internal affairs handle it, a phrase that meant the case was already being buried. Then, a witness vanished. An inmate scheduled to testify about Marcus Reed's final hours was transferred overnight. No notice, no destination listed. His cell was reassigned before morning count. Time erased. Identity dissolved. Rikers Island had perfected this. Morales reached out to a former warden who had retired quietly years earlier. They met in a diner in Queens, far from cameras and official records. He listened as she laid out the pattern, nodding slowly. "You're describing the point of no return," he said. "That's when the system stops pretending." He explained it plainly. Rikers wasn't run by chaos. It was run by compromise. Guards overwhelmed by numbers, violence, and politics began choosing which rules mattered. Inmates who could keep order gained leverage. Over time, that leverage became authority. "When guards answer to prisoners," he said, "it's not because they're weak, it's because they're afraid." The former warden warned her not to push further, not because she was wrong, but because she was right. The next week, Morales was reassigned. Officially, it was a routine rotation. Unofficially, it was exile. Her badge still worked, but her case didn't exist anymore. Marcus Reed's file was closed, Cause of death amended. Questions unanswered. Then the report leaked. A journalist published internal documents detailing violence, understaffing, and unofficial inmate control inside Rikers Island. The city responded with statements. Committees were formed. Promises were made. Rikers, they said, would be shut down. Years passed. The buildings remained. The people changed. The structure adapted. Morales followed the developments from a distance. The island's name became shorthand for failure, for reform promised and delayed. But no report ever named the unwritten agreements, the silent transfers, the rooms without records. Marcus Reed became a statistic, until 3 months later, when another inmate was found unresponsive in a different unit. Different name, same silence, same missing footage. The system hadn't ended. It had learned. Rikers Island was never just a jail. It was a reflection of what happens when institutions survive by not naming the truth, where power moves quietly and authority is decided not by law, but by fear. Some places don't need walls to keep secrets. They survive by staying unnamed. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Subscribe and like for more.